Hello again, fellow humans. A few months ago, I put together a goofily animated summary of terms of enlistment. Quite a few people seemed to like it, so without further ado, I present to you a goofily animated summary of Lines of Departure, the second book in the Frontline series, by Marko Kloos. But first, let's quickly recap the events of the first book. Andrew, our protagonist, grows up in a crime and disease-ridden welfare city, and he joins the military to escape a life of poverty. He meets the love of his life, blows up a civilian building by mistake, goes to space, and encounters strange hostile alien creatures on a frontier world, from which he barely escapes from with his life. Now it's been 5 years since the end of Book 1. For the past 5 years, humanity has been fighting a war against huge spindly aliens which have become known as the Lankies, the strange creatures that Andrew encountered at the end of the first book. In that time, the Lankies have ravaged humanity, effortlessly overrunning nearly 150 of the NAC's 200 colonies. Despite the long years of fighting, humanity still knows barely anything about their biology, their motivations, or their origin. The Lankies themselves stand 20 to 30 meters tall, weigh many hundreds of tons, and have very tough skin immune to anything short of a cannon. They also don't show up on radar or thermal sensors. Most strangely, while they don't use any tools or even clearly communicate, they do coordinate tactics effectively in battle, flanking, fanning out, and pressing the advantage in close quarters combat, where their size and strength are unmatched. The NAC, desperate for a solution, has adopted a scorched earth policy, nuking Lanky-infested colonies to try to discourage them from taking more planets. It's not working. For a time, the Sino-Russian alliance dismissed the Lankies as a hoax or a cover-up for NAC failures. That changed when the Lankies started attacking the SRA colonies too. Despite this looming threat, humanity still hasn't united to face their mutual attackers, and the NAC and SRA continue their war, exploiting each other's diverted forces to seize lightly defended systems. The NAC and SRA militaries fight across two rapidly collapsing front lines. Andrew Grayson is now an experienced combat controller, a radio operator who drops in a pod, calls in airstrikes, and coordinates orbital bombardments. He's been on almost 200 combat drops, an extraordinary number by any military standard. Meanwhile, his girlfriend Hallie has proven herself a god-tier dropship pilot, earning a Distinguished Flying Cross for heroism under fire, and now trains new pilots at Dropship U on Luna. Andrew once planned to take his meager savings and leave the military after his 5-year term was up. But with the NAC economy collapsed, currency worthless, and Earth descending into lawlessness, there's nothing he and Hallie have left to return to. They both begrudgingly re-enlist for another 5 years, and our story begins. Aboard an NAC battlecruiser, Andrew makes a quick goodbye call to Hallie before deploying to New Wales, a colony recently conquered by the Lankies and is now fully under their control. Andrew and his strike team suit up in Hostile Environment Battle Armor, or HEBA suits, commonly called bug suits by troops because of their insectoid helmets. He equips his new M80 rifle, a double-barreled 25mm high-velocity weapon built exclusively for killing Lankies. The NAC fleet decelerates into orbit and breaches the Lanky minefield, clearing out a path for Andrew and his squad, who climb into their drop pods. They're fired out of the ship's missile tubes and they dive through an atmosphere choked by carbon dioxide and Lanky nerve gas. After hitting the dirt, the team advances on foot through the hot alien world, the air thick with strange alien spores. The team uses their bug suit stealth to avoid contact with roaming Lankies as they push on towards their objective. From the elevated position, the strike team observes a Lanky city, a coral reef-like latticework of enormous, bone-like structures. The purpose of these structures is unclear. Their hollow shapes don't provide much shelter from the elements, but the Lankies seem to gather around them and concentrate their terraforming spires. The city holds thousands of Lankies. Andrew transmits targeting coordinates to the ships above. A nuclear strike is launched, and the Lanky city and surrounding terraforming spires are quickly destroyed. Andrew and his squad safely extract, having destroyed 15% of the Lanky presence on New Wales. Andrew's ship returns to Earth for a refit, and he is granted a couple of weeks of shore leave. He tries to take the opportunity to visit Hallie on Luna, but all of the shuttles are full for the next few days. He instead decides to visit his mother in the Boston Metroplex for the first time in over 5 years. Following the Lanky crisis, the Metroplexes have descended into pure lawlessness. Andrew and his mother are almost mugged on the way to the local government center, only saved at the last minute by police intervention. His mother is sick of the PRC, so Andrew uses his military rank to board a maglev train bound for a tiny town called Liberty Falls, which is around 250 kilometers northwest of the Boston Metroplex. Outside of the Metroplex live the rich suburban dwellers called Berbers, the lucky few who enjoy fresh air, good food, and open spaces. At Liberty Falls, Andrew and his mother get a free breakfast meal from a former Spaceborne rescue chief named Steve Kopka, who they meet by coincidence. Chief Kopka explains how he used his service money to open a breakfast place, but the prices have skyrocketed since the start of the Lanky War. It's here where Andrew's mom learns that Andrew has been calling down nukes in his general vicinity, and she's not very happy about it. Chief Kopka stays in contact with Andrew's mother so he can use her limited military network access to talk to his former service buddies. After a few days, Andrew heads up to Luna to visit his girlfriend Hallie. Over lunch and a beautiful view of Earth, Hallie explains that their ultra-long-distance relationship isn't enough for her anymore. She suggests they get married to capitalize on extra military leave and benefits, and because she really loves him. Andrew is shocked, but eagerly accepts, and the pair are happily engaged. Hallie tells Andrew to be back in 9 months to get married, and Andrew agrees. Andrew finishes his leave, and he is posted to the NACS Manitoba, the aircraft carrier that rescued him from the Lankies on Willoughby. The Manitoba, along with a huge task force, are ordered to attack the inner colony world of Sirius AD, one of the SRA's most heavily fortified and vital colonies. They jump to the nearby Sirius system and begin their assault. As they decelerate into orbit, the task force encounters a small orbital defense force, most of which turn tail and run, not wanting to face an entire fleet head-on. The SRA cruiser Shenzhen instead turns and fights the task force to buy time for its retreating buddies. The Shenzhen fires salvos of missiles at the NAC fleet, which are easily intercepted before they cause harm. 2 new high-tech NAC battlecruisers quickly overpower the SRA ship, destroying it with their own anti-ship missiles. With space superiority established, the NAC fleet bombards the SRA bases on the surface with conventional weapons, before deploying thousands of Marines to the surface with air and armor support. Andrew and a small strike team are sent to capture an SRA town of minimal importance. The dropships dodge anti-aircraft missiles, and the team is forced to land kilometers away from the town. But even so, Andrew and his team immediately take artillery fire as they touch down. The strike team begins their trek to the town, fighting their way through several roaming squads of SRA soldiers, taking only minimal casualties before engaging the main force at the town itself. The SRA's automated perimeter guns slow down the strike force, but they are quickly destroyed by NAC rocket launchers, and the strike team advances into town. Block by block, Andrew's team painstakingly pries the town away from the SRA defenders, who fight fiercely and refuse to surrender. At the center of the town, the NAC force makes their assault on the administrative headquarters, which doubles as a military staging area. Dropships strafe the building, and Andrew's team advances inside. After a brutal close-quarters fight, they seize the SRA building and capture its control bunker. Unfortunately, a pair of SRA bombers airstrike the administrative center, burying Andrew and his squad under the rubble and killing many NAC soldiers caught in the blast. Andrew digs himself out, and he radios friendly air to intercept. In the chaos and without air support, a fresh SRA company arrives to reinforce the town, easily outnumbering and surrounding Andrew's understrength strike force. Andrew and his team desperately retreat under a torrent of gunfire, using colonial housing blocks as cover. They punch a hole through the SRA lines and thread the needle. The pursuing SRA forces are now clumped together as they chase after the NAC team. At that same moment, air support arrives on station after scaring off the SRA bombers. Outnumbered and desperate, Andrew calls in an airstrike extremely close to his own position. The airstrike obliterates a huge portion of the town, and as the remaining SRA soldiers retreat, the battle comes to its conclusion. SRA colonial civvies rush outside to check on the wounded and yell insults at the NAC attackers, and the NAC team regroups just in case the civvies try anything foolish. Before they can, however, a blinding flash illuminates the sky, and everyone's eyes turn skyward. Andrew tries to contact the Space Force in orbit as a second flash blooms in space, and the connection takes a lot longer than usual. When the TAC link is reconnected, a Lanky seed ship, an enormous organic spaceship created by the Lankies, pops up on the TAC map seemingly from nowhere, dwarfing the NAC task force in front of it. Andrew disregards an order to shelter in place, knowing the planet is as good as lost, and calls in an extract. The dropships pick up his squad and they begin their burn to the carrier. Meanwhile, in space, the Manitoba and several escort ships burn to the FTL jump point, while the battle cruisers engage the enormous Lanky seed ship. The cruisers mag dump everything in their arsenals at the Lanky seed ship, including a few hundred megatons of nuclear missiles. As usual, nothing happens. The seed ship advances, effortlessly shrugging off the barrage, and tearing through the new cruisers with high-velocity quills in a matter of seconds, before turning and burning towards the Manitoba. The Lanky seed ship accelerates away and destroys the Manitoba, but it fails to catch up with the escort ships and it gives up the chase. A second flight of more advanced gunships break Atmo and link up with Andrew and his squad, led by Colonel Barrett, the commander of the Manitoba's air wing. He orders the fleeing escort ships to wait for them, but they refuse, afraid of the nearby Lanky seed ship. Colonel Barrett responds diplomatically, arming the gunship's weapons and threatening to nuke the fleeing ship if they don't wait, and the captain begrudgingly agrees. The dropships dock with the fleeing ships, and they jump to Earth, leaving the Lankies to gas the civilian settlements on the planet below, and establish a presence only one FTL node away from Earth. Upon his return to the solar system, the brass gets very mad at Andrew because he was ordered to shelter in place when the Lankies arrived, but instead, he disobeyed those orders and his commanding officer threatened to nuke the fleeing ships. Andrew brushes it off, knowing full well that it's the only reason he survived in the first place. Luckily, as a combat controller, he's way too valuable to throw in the brig, so instead, he's assigned to the NACS Midway, an 80-year-old aircraft carrier with a small task force, bound for an unknown location. Aboard the Midway, Andrew notices something odd about the ancient vessel. It's packed to the brim with dozens of high-yield nukes, hundreds of tons of food, a full regiment of Marines, and 2 battalions of the NAC Territorial Army, one of which is led by Andrew's former squad leader, Master Sergeant Fallon. Andrew talks to Sergeant Fallon and learns a little bit about the troubles back on Earth. With the PRCs in chaos, the nutritional allowance for NAC citizens has been repeatedly cut, starving billions of Commonwealth citizens. All over the country, civvies are rioting, attempting to storm government food storages, stopped only by indiscriminate gunfire from TA soldiers. As a result, some TA soldiers are siding with the starving civvies. Master Sergeant Fallon got her battalion in trouble because they refused to fire at fellow TA troopers who had sided with welfare citizens. The brass couldn't discharge a Medal of Honor recipient, so these 2 battalions of TA are more or less penal battalions, though not officially, and their troublemaker status is not widely known to the regiment of Marines aboard the aircraft carrier. With that, the Midway departs for the Fomalhaut system, an isolated and huge solar system that has little strategic value. It's a sparsely populated system with 2 habitable moons. One is controlled by the SRA, and the other, much less hospitable one, is controlled by the NAC. The colony moon of New Svalbard is to serve as Sergeant Fallon's gulag of sorts. The soldiers aboard Task Force Fomalhaut are informed that the Lankies have been using the NAC's own FTL network to attack Commonwealth planets. So, out of desperation, the NAC government has shut down the entire FTL network indefinitely. The task force won't be receiving any extra support, and may have to guard New Svalbard for years. The Midway mines the FTL node with nukes in case anyone tries to use it. Sergeant Fallon's TA troops are assigned to the various terraforming towns across the moon, while most Marines stay aboard the spaceships in orbit. Andrew spends several uneventful days with Sergeant Fallon at Camp Frostbite, the moon's only military base. Unfortunately, the 1-star reservist general aboard the Midway figured out that they might not have enough food to last the duration of their stay, and he puts together a plan to get more. A few kilometers from Camp Frostbite is the city of New Longyearbyen, by far the largest civilian settlement on the moon. Even at the equator, the temperature reaches -150 in the winter, New Longyearbyen has 2 enormous greenhouses that supply the Civi population with much of their food. Sergeant Fallon and a platoon of Territorial Army soldiers are flown out in 4 brand new Dragonfly gunships to seize control of the civilian food storage, greenhouses, and the airfield fuel tanks, a blatant violation of Commonwealth law. Andrew tags along as well as their combat controller. However, Sergeant Fallon has planned for this, and the TA soldiers instead stage a mutiny, detaining the Marines and pilots and seizing the advanced gunships. The civilians at New Longyearbyen are thrilled as Sergeant Fallon pledges her forces to defend the town. Civilian cops join the mutinous TA forces, and civilian aerospace craft ferry the rest of the TA troopers from terraforming stations back to the town, bolstering their defenses. They're outnumbered, but they have all the new gunships, and they know the fleet won't at least orbital strike the town and risk losing vital supplies. Sergeant Fallon broadcasts an annoyed message to the Navy and Marines, denouncing the illegal order, and ordering them to stay clear of the town at risk of death. Because of Sergeant Fallon's respect for Andrew, she gives him a choice. Return to Camp Frostbite and stay with the fleet, or remain with the mutinous Territorial Army. It's not an easy decision. Whichever side he chooses, he's turning back on friends and people he served with, and one way or another, either option could get him in front of a firing squad. His mind drifts back to the Battle of Detroit all those years ago, which still gives him regular nightmares. He remembers opening fire at starving civilians as they clawed at the fence of the government food depot. And then he thinks about his oath of service, to bravely defend the laws and the freedom of the NAC's citizens. But is he really honoring that oath by taking food and fuel from the NAC's own citizens at the point of a flechette rifle? He makes his choice, and he stays with Sergeant Fallon and the Territorial Army. Sergeant Fallon couldn't be any prouder. Andrew takes his post at the civilian airfield control tower and prepares to defend the colony from the fleet's counterattack. To test the TA's resolve, Camp Frostbite sends a squad of tanks down the road to New Longyearbyen. The tanks are detected on radar, and a TA Dragonfly moves to intercept them. When the tank opens fire on the Dragonfly responds with a huge salvo of ordnance as a show of force before target locking the lead tank. They quickly surrender, easily outmatched by the stolen gunship, and turn back for base, leaving the Dragonfly to return to its normal patrol pattern. Next, the Midway launches 2 Shrikes, ground attack spaceplanes, to attack New Svalbard, and the TA Dragonflies move to defend the colony. The Shrikes fire anti-radiation missiles at the city, which slam into the radar array at the control tower, and the TA troopers lose their radar systems. Andrew rushes to safety as the Shrikes vanish out of view. A Wasp dropship filled with Marines takes advantage of the chaos and tries to land at the airfield. But another Dragonfly intercepts it and blasts it with an anti-tank cannon. Its engine is shredded and it crashes into the airfield's runway. One of the Shrikes descends and strafes a TA Dragonfly with its rotary gun. The Dragonfly plummets out of the sky and shatters against the ice sheet. The remaining 3 Dragonflies ripple fire their missiles at the Shrike and hit it right in the engine nozzle. It careens out of the sky and smacks into a civilian housing block, exploding in a huge fireball. The other Shrike returns to orbit, and the fighting halts briefly. Sergeant Fallon receives a transmission from orbit a few minutes later. She opens it to see Colonel Campbell, the XO of the Versailles from 5 years ago. He pledges his stealth ship, the Indianapolis, to the cause of the New Svalbard Territorial Army, alongside the Gordon, one of the fleet's supply ships. He's happy to see Andrew again, and he networks him into the Indianapolis sensor suite. Andrew takes a look at the Midway just in time to see it launch a full squadron of Shrikes. As they approach the town, a squadron of Wasp dropships launch from Camp Frostbite to join the all-out assault on the city. Directed by Andrew, the Territorial Army Dragonflies take up their stations, ripple firing their missiles to temporarily scare off the Shrikes. This leaves the dropships without air support as they begin their combat landings. When 4 dropships hit the dirt at the civilian airfield, a TA Dragonfly moves into position right as the Wasps begin lowering their tail ramps. The Dragonfly opens fire, tearing through all 4 Wasps in seconds, killing dozens of Marines instantly. The Marine survivors rush to cover, only to be confronted by TA soldiers lying in wait. They quickly surrender, realizing the hopelessness of their situation. At the same time, however, several more Wasps use assault lines to land Marines in the city streets, unopposed by TA Dragonflies. As TA troopers rush to meet them, a Shrike opens up with its rotary cannon, tearing through the TA troopers easily. As gunfire breaks out across the city, a massive explosion shakes the ground, shattering the ice sheet at the edge of town. The fighting ebbs, and everyone watches as a second explosion sends ice and debris hundreds of meters into the sky. Andrew quickly recognizes this as an orbital strike from a capital ship-grade railgun. Colonel Campbell broadcasts openly that his ship, the Indianapolis, is responsible for the orbital strike, and he demands the surrender of the Marines and the fleet. Should they refuse, he threatens to fire the railgun again straight into Camp Frostbite. He also releases his nuclear safeties and threatens to nuke the aircraft carrier Midway for extra emphasis. Unable to locate the Indianapolis while under stealth, the fleet surrenders, the Marines retreat, and as the battle comes to a close, an eerie silence descends over the city. Sergeant Fallon and Colonel Campbell are discussing the terms of the Marine surrender, when a civilian scientist named Dr. Stewart asks to speak with Sergeant Fallon. Dr. Stewart explains that the town's greenhouses simply do not have enough capacity to supply both the soldiers and the civvies, and that building more greenhouses is simply impossible without resupply from Earth. The town can probably only stretch the military food stocks by an extra few months at best before everyone starves, which will probably be less than a year from now. She advises Sergeant Fallon to return to Earth, preferably before the winter arrives. Sergeant Fallon explains that this is impossible with the FTL network shutdown, to which Dr. Stewart was unaware of. One way or another, the military forces, fleet, and TA alike cannot stay on New Svalbard forever. Colonel Campbell contacts Sergeant Fallon from the Indianapolis, still running silent in orbit. He's picked up a radar blip, an SRA heavy cruiser approaching New Svalbard. It's 21 days out. The Midway and her escorts turn and burn to meet the SRA ship in dark space. Andrew studies the TAC map and immediately notices that something is very wrong. The SRA ship is broadcasting a distress beacon, flying without escorts, and taking the most obvious route possible from the SRA base to New Svalbard. It's probably not an attack, but if this really were an emergency, the cruiser should be headed for the much closer SRA base, not New Svalbard. This raises a troubling possibility. The SRA base might already have been destroyed. The Indianapolis has some of the most advanced sensors ever designed, so Andrew taps into them. He scans the surrounding area near the SRA ship. Nothing shows up on radar or on thermals, but dimly lit by the glow of the cruiser's drive plume is the unmistakable silhouette of a Lanky seed ship. Andrew contacts Dr. Stewart with a desperate question. How do you destroy an indestructible Lanky seed ship? He sends her the data on every ship and weapon the NSTA has on hand. Dr. Stewart is quick to point out that, for the first time in NAC military history, they have something new, 21 days of lead time. They also know the seed ship's location, heading, and acceleration. Dr. Stewart proposes a costly but sound plan. Take the fleet supply ship Gordon, load it up with cargo, and shoot it off at the Lanky seed ship at full burn. Seed ships are large and not very agile, so a flight computer should be able to compensate for any evasive maneuvers that the 3-kilometer-long seed ship could take. The skipper of the Gordon agrees, and over the next few days, the ship is evacuated, packed with ice from New Svalbard, and launched at a 4G burn straight towards the incoming seed ship. The Midway finally detects the seed ship and burns towards interstellar space, leaving the New Svalbard civvies on their own. Sergeant Fallon is furious. The seed ship also catches up with the fleeing SRA cruiser. The cruiser nukes the seed ship at point-blank range and gets vaporized by their own nuclear strike. As usual, nothing happens to the Lanky seed ship, and it presses on towards New Svalbard without even slowing down. The Gordon races towards the seed ship, approaching 10% of the speed of light. Oddly, the Lanky seed ship either can't detect the incoming Gordon, or doesn't care to take any evasive action, and it holds its course. On the other side of the solar system, nuclear explosions light up the void near the Fomalhaut system's FTL off-ramp, revealing a full task force of spaceships, though their IDs are unknown. They burn towards New Svalbard, which is now only guarded by the Indianapolis. There's no time to think about that, though. Everyone holds their breath as the Gordon approaches the seed ship at 5,000 kilometers per second. When the Indianapolis's shock clock reaches 0, the Gordon slams into the Lanky seed ship. A second star blooms in space, 1.1 AUs from New Svalbard. It outshines all the nuclear explosions that Andrew's ever seen, and it's so brilliant that it rivals the glow of Fomalhaut itself. When the 200 gigaton blast dies down a few minutes later, nothing remains of the Lanky seed ship except for a rapidly expanding cloud of dust and debris, proving that the Lankies can be defeated, even in space. After a round of drinks, the Indianapolis burns for New Svalbard to meet the unknown task force. The fleet that arrives in New Svalbard is a full SRA carrier group, complete with escorts and supply ships. But at the fleet's center is the NACS Regulus, one of the NAC's supercarriers, escorted by the NACS Avenger, a high-tech battlecruiser. The Regulus contacts the Indianapolis and explains that they have a truce with the SRA ships, and that they are not a belligerent task force, but rather they are refugees. The Lankies are in our solar system. They swept through the terraformed Mars colonies, destroying both of the SRA and NAC defense fleets effortlessly. They gassed the cities and killed over 20 million people. They're blockading Mars with their seed ships, but have yet to advance on Earth for some reason. Colonel Aguilar, the Regulus's commanding officer, gives all the NSTA forces a choice. Either stay and defend the colony of New Svalbard, or join an assault force to defeat the Lanky seed ships and re-establish contact with Earth. Andrew and Sergeant Fallon consider their options. With the Midway still burning for wild space, New Svalbard is no longer in imminent danger. However, eventually the food supplies will run out. They'll need a resupply from Earth, or everyone in the Fomalhaut system will starve. Not to mention, Andrew must return to Luna in time for his wedding. Earth may be a trash heap, but it's humanity's trash heap, and now they finally have a method to defend it from the Lankies, and a cause worth fighting for. Andrew and Sergeant Fallon prepare themselves for the difficult fight ahead, and the novel comes to its conclusion. I hope you had as much fun watching this goofy summary as I had making it. If you'd like me to continue this series, or not, please leave a like or a comment below. Either way, please consider that videos like this take literal weeks to make, so as fun as they are, I can't churn them out very quickly. Thank you for watching, now make like a paper bird and fly away.